There's a difference between being busy and building something. And honestly, I think a lot of us have spent years, possibly even decades, confusing the two. So in this video, I want to talk about what the difference is between actually building something or just simply being busy. And I want to talk about the point in which I realized what path I was on and what I did about it. So let's get right into it. So being busy versus actually building something. What does being busy look like? The obvious things: having a full to-do list every day, a calendar of meetings, appointments, just things to fill your week, your month, right? Constantly being on the go, constantly having to do this, do that, do this, right? That's pretty much being busy. But there's a distinction between just being busy and actually building something. When you're building something, you can be busy, right? Building towards something, but the differentiating factor is the things that you're doing have a purpose behind them, and each thing that you're doing is very intentional, working towards a clearly defined outcome, right? So being busy just for being busy's sake, you're just, going through your day doing whatever you need to do. And it could be, productive things, things that could possibly help your future, but you may just be doing those things without really any real clear end goal, right? It just looks good. We wear busyness as a badge of honor. As long as I'm busy, they can't say that I'm lazy, right? That's how we think. At least that's how I used to think, especially being a high performer. You never want to feel like you're wasting time, right? And that can come along with, just the desire to be busy as well. So, another way that we can use busyness as opposed to actually building something is just really kind of avoiding. We can use busyness as a way to avoid kind of sitting with yourself and really thinking about what it is that you want or how things are going in your life. Honestly, it is a very easy way to just avoid having to reckon with yourself. And I mean, when I say that, I know it sounds pretty dramatic, right? But I do think a lot of us tend to do that because we just don't want to kind of sit down and acknowledge the fact that we may not be happy with, the way things are going, but we're just going through the motions and doing the things anyway, because we have to support ourselves, right? We have to support ourselves and our families, right? And I think busyness is a very easy way to kind of avoid having to ask yourself those tough questions, especially when you are on the same page as far as feeling unfulfilled, in life, and knowing something needs to change, but you just don't know what. And what's the side effect? Busyness. You're most likely going to be tired all the time. At least I know that's how I felt. I was always tired, exhausted actually. Always just tired, but still pushing through and constantly doing something, right? Because I can't waste this time. I look over here and see so and so's just started a business. They just, just achieved this goal, this big milestone. And I'm not necessarily trying to keep up with the Joneses, but if they can do it, I know if they can do it with all of that stuff that they've got going on, I don't have nearly as much stuff going on. So I should be able to just knock this thing out and do this thing. Honestly, that's just really how I felt. I wasn't particularly comparing my outcomes with other people, but I just would always look and see, well, dang, they got all of this stuff going on and yet they're still able to do this thing. And I don't have nearly this much stuff going on. And I'm just over here just like, man, what am I doing wasting time? I could be doing this thing, right? And I fell victim to that thought process for so long, for so many years. Um, and it really takes its toll. It really takes its toll on you. But I know for me, how I felt is, I just felt like I was just wasting time, that I could be doing something more useful as opposed to just resting and prioritizing my rest. And not realizing, okay, if I actually take time to just like chill out and breathe for a minute, and I mean really, really rest, not just veg out on, TV shows or whatever, like really just, rest without constantly thinking about the next thing that I need to get done, right? Not realizing that that would have energized me. At least I imagine that it would have helped energize me a bit better, allowed me to complete things in a more sustainable way, as opposed to just forcing my way and just pushing my way through regardless of how I felt, right? So busy people are always tired, right? You're always tired, and you don't really necessarily allow yourself enough time to rest, right? You may not allow yourself enough time to rest, right? On the other hand, if you are working towards building something, your busyness in that sense, you could get tired, but you're doing it in a more sustainable fashion. Like because there's purpose and intentionality behind what you're doing, um, being tired is a bit more manageable because you're not just being busy for busy's sake. You can, in this sense, you should be able to allow yourself to pace yourself, or honestly, sometimes the excitement of working towards something you really want usually energizes you. At least I know for me, when I'm excited about something, I rarely get tired when I'm working on it or working towards it, right? Because, the adrenaline rush, you feel good about what you're working on, right? At least that's what has been my experience, right? So, what does building actually look like? Like I said, everything that you do is with intention, and each action that you take, it connects back to, a bigger goal of, a bigger vision of what it is you're trying to accomplish, right? um and kind of connecting back to what I was saying about, you know moving at a slower pace because the things that you're doing are, purposeful and with intention. So you sometimes, when you're building towards something, because you're moving with more intention, it might naturally be a slower process, as opposed to just being busy for busy's sake and just always finding the next thing and the next thing and the next thing to do, right? When you're building towards something, you should be more strategic, a little bit more methodical, and what it is you're doing. So sometimes that process progress can feel super slow, and that you can't really see it right away. And especially when you're a high performer, that can be tough to deal with, because your achievements, the things that you're going after and accomplishing, or like a form of validation. But when you don't get that, immediate, like when you can't immediately see the end result of what it is that you're doing, it can be challenging to deal with, because you can feel like maybe you're just doing stuff and it doesn't matter, right? In the end, right? At least that's how I kind of felt like a lot of times, just doing stuff and just like, why am I doing this? Right? I was always asking myself, all right, I just spent all that time doing this. All right, hopefully it pays off at some point. That's honestly the thought process behind a lot of the things that I've done in the past, just kind of going after one thing after another, right? And when there's no clear purpose or, end goal behind all the things that you're doing that are keeping you busy, guess what happens? Burnout, right? That, you're more prone to, having to um, overcome burnout, because you're just constantly doing these things. You're exhausted. You're not giving yourself time to rest. You're just going after one thing after another. You're mentally exhausted, most likely, you know, and that thing, it just, burnout just creeps up on you. And a lot of times you don't even know that you're dealing with burnout until sometimes after the fact, or like when you're really in it, and then something hits you or makes you, forces you to kind of slow down or stop being so busy. So yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things with, like, especially when you're a high performer. I promise you, like, bit of an overachiever, you know what I mean? You're just going after the next big thing, or the next thing that possibly just makes you look good, makes you appear that you're, productive, you know what I mean? But that stuff is for the birds, honestly. Like, that's just how I feel after doing that, for so many years and so long, and just hitting a wall twice throughout my career, just kind of constantly going after the next thing, the next promotion, the next certification, higher education, learning the new thing. It just takes its toll, it just takes its toll. And, after kind of dealing with burnout the second time around, I was just like, nah, I have to figure out a different way to do this, because, I'm constantly being busy, always feeling guilty about resting, because I feel like I could be doing something else, right? So, um, and for me, like, that point came when I found myself, like, achieving things, really, like, really achieving a lot of, pretty lofty goals, when it comes to, like, working in tech, particularly with certifications, exams, and stuff. And when I kind of found myself asking, like, I found myself asking myself this question, like, okay, I just did this thing. I don't really feel particularly excited about it or happy about it. I know that I've just accomplished this thing. Now, what am I going to do next? Right? Like, and when I say, like, what am I going to do next, is because I really didn't have a clear, like, end goal in mind. I'm just kind of doing these things in hopes that maybe one day it may help me further my career, right? Or, it may help me get you know, um, the next good job, right? But it wasn't like I didn't have any real plan or goal. I just was like doing these things, and maybe I just have another thing to put on my resume. Hopefully, it'll be good enough to get me a great job, right? But to me, that's really not building. In my opinion, that's really not building anything, building towards anything. You're just kind of throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing, what sticks, at least that's how I kind of felt like I was operating. On paper, this stuff looked amazing. Looks amazing, right? But ultimately, because I really didn't know exactly why I was doing all of these things. So when I found myself kind of questioning that, like, why am I doing all of this? For what? Why am I spending all of this time? I'm tired all the time. What am I doing all of this for? That's when I stopped. That's when I kind of realized, you know what? I'm just doing stuff just to be doing it. And no, I need to stop and just figure out what it is I actually want, in life. Um, and then work backwards from that. Instead of just trying to pile on these things to get to that, start with that and work backwards to see, what actually needs to be done. Right. So that's where I find myself now here, just, you know, taking a bit of a career break, resetting, recovering from exhaustion, due to burnout. And so I just wanted to talk about that today because I've mentioned this in other videos about, being busy, like how I'm busy now, but it's so different because the busyness isn't tied to avoidance and restlessness and guilt from feeling like, I shouldn't be resting. It's, busy just because I just got a lot of random things to do to take care of while I'm, home with my mom and helping her out with things and stuff of that nature. But it's just different because it's not attached to any deeper, like deeper feeling of, of burnout, basically, right? A result of burnout. And so, yeah, just in the process of just changing and shifting. And that's what I'm literally just working on in this season of my life now. It's just, okay, I've mapped out a plan, I know what my end goal is now, and what are the specific things that I need to do, to get to that, to achieve that goal. And it's slow. It's a lot slower than how I was operating when I was working full time and going to school full time. Um, and, just living in the area that I was living in and trying to keep up and, be social and do things. And it's definitely slowed down, you know like a lot, you know what I mean? So, and just kind of keeping the end goal in mind, knowing that while I'm home, specifically, eyeing certain things as far as where I'm going to take my career next, where I'm going to live next, and what I want my actual time, my schedule to be, and what I want my life to look like, and just working from there, working backwards from there. Once I'm kind of ready and have the energy and focus to be able to start back working on the career side of things, I see myself becoming a little bit busier, but again, still like hyper focused on, one particular pathway, but still maintaining flexibility because things change. Life be lifing, and still just being able to maintain that flexibility. But at right now in this juncture in my life, prioritizing rest, right, is like my main thing. I mean, that is the theme. Cozy rest, right? So yeah, so how do you know which one you are dealing with, right? Are you just being busy just to be busy, or are you actually building something? Are you reacting to what's happening to you in your daily, life, or are you actually directing the things that you're doing and being proactive in those things, right? You have to kind of ask yourself, take a step back and kind of ask yourself that. And again, going back to what I've mentioned about how you know when you're building something, you want to ask yourself, is what I'm doing actually connected to an ultimate like end goal, you know, or am I just doing these things just because, it helps me feel and look productive, right? You want to ask yourself these kinds of questions. So, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that today because, just thinking about busyness and how I was just thinking about how when I first came home, I was extremely busy because I was like so focused on decluttering and, reselling things, which I was thinking about that today because I still have like a few boxes. I still have maybe a good 3 or 4 big boxes of things that I have yet to get rid of as far as either reselling or, recycling. And I was just thinking about like, dang, it was just so crazy when I first came home, like how busy I was with trying to get rid of, the stuff that I had. And I got rid of a good amount. I would say probably half of the stuff that I, intended on, selling and donating, but I still have a good amount still left, but it's manageable now. Before, it was just like so much stuff that I had to work really hard to kind of clear out, to make space. And I was just thinking about how busy it kept me, especially for, like, I would say them first like 3 weeks or so that I moved home. Like, I was just constantly just doing stuff, dropping things off, creating listings, actually selling stuff, dropping things off, picking things up, you know, constantly doing stuff. And then I was looking at those boxes today and I was like, oh man, now I'm chilling now. Everything has really slowed down. So I thought that that would be a good, topic to touch on today. In any event, let me know in the comments. Are you currently like super busy, or are you actually working towards building something? I'd love to talk to you guys about it in the comments. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and watching this video. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, good people, take care.